500 years ago, North America produced more food than it does today. The diversity that those created was truly spectacular. Maybe we ought to be looking at some of those historic patterns and seeing how we can mimic them rather than to just throw them out and say, well, let's build a factory farm.
Joel Salatin, pioneer in the field of regenerative farming, lecturer and author. Joel is an expert on stewarding the earth by regenerating soil and how people can become self-sufficient even on a small piece of land.
What do you think that it would take for us to change the way that agriculture is done in the United States?
Well, the first thing would be to abolish the USDA. Make America Healthy Again is something that is actually getting some traction in the mainstream media.
I've tried a lot of energy healing modalities over the years, and as an energy sensitive, I can easily tell if something is legitimate. Hands down, one of my best experiences has been with Jamie of Refractive Healing. Refractive healing is a unique technique that channels rainbow light energy through your energy body. And let me tell you, I could feel its calming and supportive light flowing downward through my crown. I even received a physical healing during my session. I cannot recommend Jamie's work highly enough. Book your $22 Refractive Boost Distant Healing Session with Jamie today at refractivehealing.com. Check the description or the pinned comment for the link. Thank you to Refractive Healing for partnering with me in this video.
Welcome, Joel. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Melissa. It's a really honor and a delight to be with you.
Likewise, like I was just telling you, I've had a huge amount of my followers specifically that are interested in this topic. And with everything that's happened in the world over the last few years, more and more people are thinking about disconnecting from the system, becoming more self-sufficient, thinking about their health and what they're eating and how they're living is affecting everything. So I'm really excited to talk to you, and I would love to start by asking you about your personal journey. You are a leader in this field right now. How did you get started with this? What was it that caused you to decide to go down this route?
Well, I got chickens when I was 10 years old from a Sears Roebuck catalog. And so our family had come here to this location in 1961. I was just 4 years old. It was the cheapest, most rundown, gullied rock pile in the whole region. And so it was cheap. And Dad sought counsel. How do I make a living on a small farm? And all the counsel was, plant corn, put on more chemical fertilizer, build silos, borrow money, graze the woodlands, all this stuff. And with his background of his dad's interest in compost and ecology and things, he knew that was not the right thing. And so he and Mom took off-farm jobs to pay for pay the mortgage. And we went kind of into glorified homestead/experimentation mode for roughly 10. In those 10 years, he experimented with portable electric fencing. We did some composting, mobile infrastructure. So I started with my chickens in 1967 when I was 10, just loved them, and the flock grew, and I sold at a curb market, the kind of precursor of today's farmers markets, throughout high school. And Dad and Mom never made a living from the farm, but they got the mortgage paid finally. And so now I'm back from college, and now I'm facing how do I make a living on this place? And same situation. The head start that I had was that it was paid for. The land was paid for, so there's no mortgage. But still, a small farm. But question: how do I make a living? And so I took all these experiments we'd been doing and started leveraging them a little more. And Teresa and I got married in 1980, and we made an apartment up in the attic of the old farmhouse, and we lived up there. We called it our penthouse. It's all about how you look at it. and we drove a $50 car. We lived on about $300 a month. If we didn't grow it, we didn't eat it. We always said if we could have grown toilet paper and Kleenex we'd have pulled the plug on society. We didn't have a TV. We never went out to eat. We never went on vacation. And in 2 years, we were able to save enough to live for 1 year without any outside income. And so September 24, 1982, I walked out of that newspaper office. I was an investigative reporter at a newspaper, and I walked out of that office and came home full time. I didn't think we would make it. I really thought that, in a year, I'd probably have to go off farm again, but I felt like that my total time away could be cut way down by being home for a full year. And as it turned out, I never went back. It took us about 3 years till we could, exhale and say, yeah, I think we're going to make it. Took about 3 years, but we did. And now we have about 22 full-time salaries from the farm. And it's been a tremendous blessing, and it's kind of at least for us, it's kind of a big deal now. But that's how we started.
What an incredible story. So you mentioned that the land that your father started with was a cheap, rundown piece of land. Was it had it been previously used for industrial agriculture?
Well, of course, this was 1961, and that's kind of before what we think of as industrial agriculture.
True.
But it had been incredibly abused. It had been plowed for 150 years. Some, depending on how steep the slope, 3 to 5 feet of topsoil had washed off. So we were on bedrock, and there were large areas that were just solid rock. I mean, a quarter acre that just didn't have a grass, weed, nothing. It was just solid shale rock down to the bedrock. Today, all those areas have about 14 to 16 inches of soil on them. And we didn't haul soil in. It gradually, built soil on top with our practices. And I mean, I can remember as a kid walking the farm and never setting foot on a piece of vegetation. There was that much bare ground. It was that thin between things. And today, the gullies are not eroding anymore. And we have 7 or 8 times the production that we had then. And we've never planted a seed or bought a bag of chemical fertilizer. So, yeah, it's a different. Went from the armpit of the community to the jewel of the community. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, 100%. And this idea of being able to restore and rejuvenate land is so exciting to me. For those who may not be familiar, could you explain what it is about industrial farming now, but even what they were doing back then that's depleting the soil?
Well, the quickest way to deplete soil is tillage, plowing. And that's why there's such a huge, push today for no-till agriculture, which in general has traded the plow for herbicide. So instead of plowing, we're now herbiciding. So it's kind of a little bit like trading the devil for the witch. And there are some wonderful new techniques. This crimping, mulching, cocktail type of thing is wonderful. But the main thing to reduce tillage is going back to a grass-based, a perennially grass-based agriculture, if you will, a prairie-based agriculture, especially for the herbivores. And so we just let whatever grow would grow. We had a lot of thistles, a lot of weeds and different things, and we started composting. We started trying to close the leaks. We built portable shade mobiles so we could we could tell the cows, you're gonna lounge right here today on this pile of rocks or this batch of thistles or double shoestring or whatever it was, and gradually over time, the biological clock ticks at its own speed, and gradually, we started seeing those changes in the landscape. It's quite remarkable to have in one lifetime seeing the transformation that could occur on a piece of land, in a lifetime. It's quite remarkable.
Wow, that is incredible. I can imagine seeing it would be amazing. So tilling the soil is the biggest issue. And then you talked about rejuvenating it with composting, crimping, and mulching. What is crimping?
So
Quick question. Could you take a moment and leave a comment on this video? It is the easiest way to boost the video in the algorithms. I try to respond to as many of you as I can the day the video is posted, so the more quickly you comment, the more likely you'll get a response from me. Also, I just wanted to let you know that my 8-week course, Alchemy, is relaunching again. If you want to transform your consciousness from feeling stuck in the heavy emotions of fear, shame, or anger, and alchemize them into a state of abundance, freedom, and joy, this is the course for you. And finally, we have 2 new exciting offerings in our community. Starting immediately, all members at any tier will have access to monthly live workshops and Q&As with podcast guests, as well as access to free distant healing sessions with Jamie of Refractive Healing. All the links are in the description. Now back to the show.
So crimping is where you grow a cover crop, something that's real thick, and often a combination of things like hairy vetch and rye for it to trellis up on, maybe a legume. And then instead of plowing, so you're getting ready to plant corn or soybeans or something, instead of plowing it or killing it, you run it's like a great big roller with pieces of metal on it that mash down and kind of crimp that crop. And sometimes that cover crop can be, oh goodness, 4 inches thick. I mean, you're laying down this big, 5 or 6 foot tall, canopy of vegetation, down on the ground and crimping it. And so it's pretty thick. So the mulch then, it protects the soil while the new seedlings are coming up. And of course, it feeds the soil then as all that carbon decomposes with earthworms and microorganisms and things. That's actually what feeds the soil. The other, what I failed to mention was the other, huge way to destroy the soil is overgrazing. And that of course was done here, and it's still being done ubiquitously where you overgraze. And so this is where I said, Dad got a hold of some Andre Voisin stuff. He's the Frenchman who basically developed, rotation. He called it rational grazing, where we're rationing out each day's amount of forage. So in other words, you don't have a field and you just turn the cows in and leave them for a month or a year. Instead, you confine them tightly to a small paddock and you move them every day across the landscape so that you can control the level of the plant in its physiology, in its maturity. You can control when the cow actually grazes off that plant. And nature did this historically this was done with fire and with predation, wolves and bears and things that move things around. Today, we've got fences, so the herbivores don't move from Florida to Ontario anymore, and so we use portable electric fencing to be able to mimic these movement patterns. In nature, herbivores move, mob, and mow. They mob for predator protection. They move for new forages, and they mow for their own feed. And so moving, mobbing, mowing. And so that's the template that we use then with now portable electric fencing, portable shade mobiles. So water gets to be, how do you get water to all these paddocks? So we've got 12 miles of buried water line that give us pressurized water over, around all the fields. So no matter where that paddock happens to fall, we've got access to good water. And here where we are, unlike perhaps Michigan, where you are, we have enough elevation difference that we've gone up into the hills and put in permaculture, high permaculture type ponds that gravity flows. So we've got this 12-mile grid of water that's pressurized by gravity, no pumps, no electricity, no anything on the farm. So those are the kinds of infrastructure developments that it takes to be able to leverage the historic patterns of soil building that vegetation and animals in symbiosis actually created.
Thank you for explaining that. So I've been listening to a lot of lectures on climate change right now, and like a lot of people saying the exact same thing that you mentioned, that in the old days we had these groups of herbivores that would roam the grasslands and contribute to the cycle of keeping the soil healthy by like grazing the grass, then it would grow back up, and then they would trample it down, and this would capture carbon into the soil. And moving from that system to the farming system that we have now, where we're growing monocrops and we have the plants and animals separated, is what's contributing to a lot of our environmental issues. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, I would agree. And I would even go so far as to point out to everybody to realize that 500 years ago, North America produced more food than it does today. Now, it wasn't all eaten by people. We had a couple 100 million bison. We had 2 million wolves, each of whom needed 20 pounds of meat a day. That's 40 million pounds of meat just being eaten by wolves. We had 200 million beavers that ate more food, that ate more vegetation, vegetables and stuff. I mean, they weren't eating squash, but I mean, they were eating vegetation more than all the people in North America today because, they're herbivores. We had birds, Audubon sat under a tree in 1820, and he recorded, he said, "I haven't seen the sun for 3 days. The flock of passenger pigeons was so huge flying over him that it blocked out the sun for 3 days." That's before Tyson and Cargill and Purdue and Pilgrim's Pride were around. So the abundance that the Native American fire-based ecology and the natural, diversified wild ecology, the diversity that those created was truly spectacular. And so there was actually way more animals. There was more weight of animals, including humans. And I'm not saying humans are animals. I'm just saying take all the way to the humans, all the way to the animals. We had more weight of moving things in North America 500 years ago than we have weight today. And that was before John Deere and hybrid seeds and chemical fertilizer and everything else. So, that should give us a pause to step back a little bit and say, maybe we ought to be looking at some of those historic patterns and seeing how we can mimic them rather than to just, throw them out and say, well, let's build a factory farm and segregate everything that used to be integrated.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so I live on an acre of land, and it has been my dream to start growing things. Like, I want to start a food forest on my land eventually, but on such a small space, a lot of people are working with just a little bit of space. What would you recommend to them as some first steps to just start to rejuvenate that soil? Because, I mean, grass has been growing in our yards for so long. The soil is so depleted. You have to use some kind of compost or fertilizer even to grow a vegetable garden.
Yeah, so I'm going to start probably not where you expected me to start. I'm going to start with, you've got to start in your kitchen. Before you go outside, you have to start in your kitchen. Americans have amazing kitchens these days. They're not grandma's kitchen. I mean, we got hot and cold running water, refrigerators, time bake, Instapots, crock pots, bread makers, ice cream makers, KitchenAids, all sorts of cool things. And so I think where you have to start is with domestic culinary arts, where you actually want to participate in the texture, the taste, the handling of food. I think that's where it starts. Now, once you kind of feel comfortable with that, and mentally I'm ready to move forward with this, then you look at your grocery bill and you say, well, what do I like to eat? And what can grow here? In Michigan, you're not going to grow bananas. You're not going to grow pineapple. Okay. But you can pick some things. And pick some things that you really like. Maybe there's something like blackberries that you really love, but you just can't afford them in the store. They're so expensive, so you just don't eat them very much. So this is a time to really massage your indulgences, okay? If there's something that you really like to eat, but you just don't. I mean, I'm thinking of especially like berries, blackberries, strawberries, raspberries, things like that. And you gradually convert your place into an edible landscape. So you can gradually take out the ornamentals and gradually move them to edibles. It doesn't take any more land to have an ornamental tree than it does an apple tree, okay? Or an ornamental hedge versus blueberry bushes or raspberry or blackberry vines, and they can be thornless. I mean, they've got cultivars now today that are thornless. You can pick a gallon of thornless blackberries in less than 10 minutes. They're big and thornless, and it's really wonderful. And then look at your vegetables, your produce. Do you like tomatoes? Well, grow tomatoes. If you like potato, look, if you don't like kohlrabi, don't grow kohlrabi. This is not a time to grow something that that's going to be arduous or laborious for you. So do that. And then of course, when it comes to animals, of course, I'm an animal guy. And my animal of choice for sure is the laying chicken. Fast on her heels will be a meat chicken, but you start with the laying chicken because the laying chicken is way more aggressive, hardier. They'll eat all your kitchen scraps, so you don't have to throw those away anymore. Those become food for the chicken. The chicken lays you wonderful eggs, and now you're salvaging your waste. You're replacing your egg budget. And remember, every dollar you save is worth $1.40 because you don't have to pay taxes on it. And so, so this is a way that you can get out of that cycle of I have to earn more. Well, if you start growing a lot of your own food, you can come off of that cycle, and maybe you can start doing some different kinds of vocational things that aren't quite so treadmill-y because you're saving a lot of money. And then later the meat chickens can go on. Now, let me just say this: on an acre, you said an acre, so an acre gets to be interesting because on an acre, I would not recommend letting the chickens range very much. The reason is because they can't get far enough away from an interesting home base to make them not roost or lay there. And an interesting home base is probably the lawnmower handle, the vise in the shop, if you have a shop, any kind of shop. But they're going to find something. So the hybrid there is to have a stationary chicken run and coop with deep bedding. So it's all about the carbonaceous diaper, and this can be 24 inches. So you're going to have a kind of a pony wall, a containment thing, and let it be 36 inches deep even is fine. So they're basically living on compost. That way there'll be no smell, no flies, and they will be generating your compost because they're going to fluff in it and churn it up and everything and add oxygen. And that will be your compost for your garden. One of the biggest problems in little acreages like you're describing is, where am I going to get, I don't want to use chemical fertilizer and goodness, to buy 2 pickup loads of potting soil, man, that gets expensive. And so, what am I going to do? So one of the reasons to have some chickens like that in a stationary place rather than just running around is you get to collect, you leverage their manure so much more, which then gives you way more compost, so you have more. Including, if you have 1 acre, I would definitely, I don't know if you like pork, but I would definitely look at having 2 hogs. Again, deep diaper, just a simple little shed roof over them. And pigs don't mind getting wet. So it can even be shade cloth, all right? But they do need to be protected a little bit from the sun. And with deep diaper, that's wood chips, a couple pickup loads of wood chips or leaves or your lawn clippings, collect your lawn clippings and throw them in. And there again, the pigs will not only give you pork to eat very, very cheaply, but you'll have all this wonderful compost to put around your berry bushes and your raised bed gardens and fruit trees and things like that. So you start using your animals, leveraging your animals as I like to think about it as I'm being paid to generate fertility. So you're buying in some feed, yes, for the animals, but that feed is basically going through the animals, being hyped up through their manure, and now with the compost, now you're able to actually have your on-site fertility generated.
I love that, like how the animals and plants just work together in symbiosis like that.
Yeah, well, you can do that. I mean, if you the other approach, of course, is an animal-less approach, but you have to realize that half of the consumer dollar in America, half of the consumer dollar is animal protein. 25% is dry goods, sugar, flour, dry goods, nuts, and 25% is wet goods, berries, apples, bananas, produce, fresh produce, and then 50% is animal based. So if you really want to start chopping away at your at your grocery budget, the animals are the one to that's where your great big reaction is with the animals. An acre isn't big enough for a cow, but so you're probably going to have a hard time hitting your dairy component there. The dairy, you're just going to have to continue getting from something. Now, if so what's the minimal for for a cow? Something around 2 to 3 acres. Then you could have a cow. But at 1 acre, probably you're going to be limited to chickens and a couple pigs, if you like pork. And obviously you could add rabbits as well. Rabbits are quiet. They're wonderful for manure as well. But the key is with your animals on something as small as an acre or even smaller, a half acre, the beauty of the animals is not just your own food, but a lot of it is being able to get your own compost so you can grow really high quality vegetables and berries and edible tree fruits right there on site without having to buy something from Lowe's or something else and import it in. You're actually having the enjoyment of growing the animals. I always call it's like I'm being paid to apply fertilizer. That's the idea. But you can't utilize you can't leverage the manure unless you get it in one spot where you can where it'll compost and you can actually shovel it. Chickens running around in the yard, all the manure that they drop, well, half of it your kids are going to track into the house, and then that doesn't make mama very happy. And we all know what happens when mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So there is a place for stationary livestock structures, but they do require a carbonaceous diaper bedding, nice deep, 24 to 36 inch depth, so that you've got that wonderful big carbonaceous sponge. You're basically putting your animals on a compost pile.
Okay, yeah, I'm really thankful to you explaining that. You mentioned that it is possible to do without animal manure. How else would you go about creating compost for people who may not have animals or may not have the space?
Yeah, so of course, animal manure is magic, but there are ways that you can do it. Obviously, your kitchen scraps, any meat scraps, things like that, that's going to be high in nitrogen. Protein and nitrogen go close together. So compost pile, you need nitrogen, carbon, water, temperature, oxygen, and microbes. Those are the 5 ingredients of compost, and they've got to be in a certain ratio. And so, if it pickles, if it gets all slimy, then generally you're too rich in nitrogen, or you're excluding oxygen. If it gets too hot and gets all ashy and white from what we call fire fanging, then you've probably got too much oxygen, not enough moisture, or too much carbon and not enough nitrogen. So normally green stuff, so lawn clippings, green leaves, green material is high in nitrogen because it's very proteinaceous. If it's brown, then your nitrogen is not as high. So wood chips, brown leaves, straw, hay, brown stuff, non-green is going to be higher in carbon. Your food scraps are going to be very, very high in nitrogen. And yes, we do indeed compost, bones and meat and everything else. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So I had heard that you couldn't compost proteins and things.
No, you can compost anything. I mean, you can even compost a leftover bureaucrat. If it ever lived, it can decay. If it ever lived, it can decay.
Okay. And so what's the best way to create, can you throw it in a pile in the yard? I told you, I have no experience with this. Very basic questions.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, a compost, especially if you're a small scale, you want vertical sides. You don't want it to just kind of and spread out. And so, the most typical way to hold up sides is either with some used pallets. If you can find some used pallets, people usually have some pallets. Obviously, you can use something like a fence. Some people just take a piece of fence, web wire fence, or a cattle panel, and put it in a circle. All right. And just keep adding stuff, in there. You don't want a solid wooden side because you want oxygen to be able to get in on the edges. But the beauty of something of some sort of a hold up thing, a thing to hold it up and have a vertical side, is that helps to keep predators and varmints out, possums and skunks and raccoons and stuff. If you just kind of make a haphazard pile, you'll find something digs in it all the time, and you're constantly going to be going out there, and you're going to have the sides all pulled away, neighbors, dogs, whatever. But some sort of a containment barrier with some, with enough holes in it to let oxygen in will really protect it and keep it tidy and clean and keep it going.
Okay. And you can get some fencing like that pretty cheaply at a place like Home Depot, maybe. So
or Tractor Supply. Yeah. Lowe's. Yeah.
Yeah. So for anyone watching, get some wire fencing, start throwing in your grass clippings and your kitchen scraps, and then you'll have a black gold compost to put out next year for your garden.
That's right. I mean, it is a science, but there's also an art to it. Mm-hmm. And usually you don't get good until you have a couple failures. So, don't quit just because it's not right the first time. Read some books, look at some YouTube stuff on it. And, composting's been done for a long, long time by people a lot less smart than you are. So, you can do this. This is not outside your capabilities.
Right. Okay. So for people who may want to start growing some crops or something in their yard, turn their yard more into an edible forest garden property thing, what are some good cover crops to start with to start replenishing the soil?
Well, there's a lot. When you kind of threw me a curveball there, I thought you were going one direction and you went a little different. The thing to remember with a yard, okay, so you got sod. You've got yard sod. So if you're going to put that into a garden, you've got to somehow get rid of the sod. And so there are numerous ways to do that. Obviously, you can till it up. You can hand spade it. What I've come to enjoy a lot more is just put cardboard on it and smother it with cardboard. Then I don't have to till it up, plow it up, change anything. Now that does take some time. You can't put, cardboard on it and plant tomorrow, but you can absolutely put cardboard on it. Some of the nicest beds I ever made, I just put a wooden barrier down, kind of, to identify my boundary, put a bunch of cardboard in there and just piled about 2 feet of leaves on top, let it sit for about 6 months. And man, I had the most beautiful soil you could ever imagine. The cardboard decomposed and the worms came up, and the worms, of course, the grass died because it was smothered. and the worms just ate up all the grass, and it was the prettiest. It was like potting soil, and with no tillage and no nothing. So you can kill sod by smothering it. I mean, you can even go out, identify what you want, and just put down some tarps. If you want beds that are whatever 4x8, put down 4x8 pieces of tarp, and in the spring, it won't be sod. It's going to be tilled up ground that the worms have tilled up for you, because the tarp killed the sod. So I'm not a big advocate of tillage and spading, but that's a lot of work. And so if you can figure out a way to put a cover on to use smothering rather than tillage, I think you can get where you want to be a lot simpler and easier and save your back.
So I'd like to ask you, switching gears a little bit, what do you think that it would take for us to change the way that agriculture is done in the United States and switch over to something more like what you're doing?
Well, the first thing would be to abolish the USDA. I mean, you just abolish it. There's really no, I mean, yeah, you can cherry pick and find a couple of, questionably good programs that they do, but in general, the thrust thematically, the USDA is not being helpful, and the whole farm bill, the whole farm policy is not helpful. I mean, they subsidize or insure only six crops, and all of those are annuals. We've got too much of them anyway, and it obfuscates the other possible things you might want to grow, and tends to concentrate all the interest in those six things: rice, sugar cane, cotton, wheat, soybeans, and corn. Those are the six crops, in case somebody wants to know what they are. And so, I mean, the entire manipulative, the interventive manipulative policies in the country have a lot to do actually with what farmers grow and how things develop. I mean, just the SNAP program, used to be food stamps. The SNAP program, it subsidizes to the tune of $10 billion with a B, $10 billion a year, Coke, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, Mountain Dew. 10% of all SNAP funds go for high fructose sugary drinks. And so there again, what we have a policy, we have a system that doesn't differentiate between good food and bad food, and we have a USDA now that in writing says that Fruit Loops and Cheerios are more nutritious than beef. And so, ever since the food pyramid came out in 1979, putting Cheerios and Fruit Loops on the bottom as the foundation of nutrition, we've had an escalating, diabetes, obesity, autism, everything else issue. And so, we are right now, there's no argument to this. Right now, the U.S. is the most unhealthy nation on the planet. And, Melissa, we just came through the Summer Olympics. And, if you have any American blood in you at all, right, you're rooting for your American team. We want to have the best basketball team, best soccer team. And, how can you not love Simone Biles? We got the number one gymnast in the world. There are things where we like to be number one. But there's something where you don't want to be number one, and you don't want to be number one in health costs per capita. You don't want to be number one in non-infectious disease morbidity. You don't want to be number one, but we are. I mean, take the most backwater nation in the world, and we still lead them in cancer, heart disease, autism, obesity, diabetes, all of these things. And so. The first thing I think we need to change in the U.S. is our ag policy, but it's a juggernaut. It's a juggernaut of status quoism. The powers that be don't want that to change. So how do you change? If you say, well, the entrenched system is not going to change, how do you change? Well, you change like all really great, truth movements change, and it's one person at a time. One person that wakes up and says, I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm not going to trust I'm not going to trust Monsanto anymore. And usually that takes some sort of, illness, sickness, something that kind of, hits you upside the head, and you say, oh, okay, now I connect the dots. I'm going to disentangle. And so the beauty of this is that to change, let me back up. Farmers have always produced what the market asks for. Farmers have always produced what the market asks for. Listen, if people didn't want high fructose corn syrup, farmers wouldn't grow so much corn. Okay? So farmers have always produced what consumers ask for. And so the secret to the change is individual buying habits, is what's on your table. And once people realize, well, what's on my table is what becomes my health plan and what becomes the landscape that my grandchildren will inherit, you start thinking through, intentionally, well, is what's on my plate, does it actually increase health or decrease health? Does it increase soil or decrease soil? Does it add whatever, species diversity, or does it decrease species diversity? And if what I'm eating makes infertile frogs and three-legged salamanders and eagle eggs that won't hatch, if that's what I'm eating produces, then what does it produce in me, in people? And suddenly we see, phrases that when I was a kid, there was no such thing as food allergy. You never heard the phrase. It wasn't even uttered. If you wanted a birthday party for 3-year-olds, the moms didn't have to spend a week deciding what could be the treat or not. You just had a party and all the kids came. Nobody even talked about anything. But now we got food allergies. We've got, gluten intolerance. We've got, all these issues in addition to the pathogens, Salmonella, E. coli, high path avian influenza, all these things. And what these are fractures. They're fractures within the food agriculture sector that is pushing back against a conquistador exploitive mentality. And this lexicon is nature screaming, enough disrespect, enough abuse, enough, erosion, and is asking for some redemptive relief. And so as individuals look in the mirror and say, you know what, I'm going to do all I can to change this trajectory. One person. We've all heard of the Great American Smokeout. That one day smokeout thing. Well, we could have a 1 week no fast food out in the country. If we had a 1 week no fast food out in the country, or I guess it would be not. That's redundant. A double negative. Fast food out. A 1 week fast food out thing in the country, it would bring the entire industrial food system to its knees. And that wouldn't take litigation. It wouldn't take a politician. It wouldn't take an agency. It wouldn't take anything. It would all be grassroots from the bottom up.
Oh, it would be amazing. So I guess the biggest thing, from what I hear from what you're saying, is educate people. Like, people need to be educated so that they know how our system is affecting them, how it's affecting the environment. I heard some statistics, and I didn't look into them myself, but I heard some statistics about where our health is as a country right now, that like 30% of teenagers now have prediabetes or diabetes, and cancer skyrocketing in young people, and like a large percentage of people aren't fit enough to join the military. And I mean, maybe this will be the wake up call that people need. And then if we can get the education out to say, hey, it's the food, it's the lifestyle, and then one by one we can start making better choices. I mean, are you hopeful that this is a possibility that we could change things, or does it just seem like out of reach?
Yeah. Well, I'm always hopeful. I've quit being surprised at how duplicitous people can be, though, at swallowing a fraudulent yarn. But for sure, COVID and the whole, Anthony Fauci deal at COVID, I think woke up a lot of people to realize that it's not all the orthodox narrative has some flaws in it. And so, that's been a big change. But, you mentioned the military thing. The autism is a big deal as well. 40 years ago, 1 in 10,000, and today it's 1 in 34, and continuing to trend. I mean, this was part of the fuel of the RFK Jr. campaign, right? And I don't want to get all political, but the fact that this Make America Healthy Again is something that is actually getting some traction in the mainstream media is quite astounding. I mean, it doesn't take much TV watching to realize that like half of the ads on TV are pharmaceutical companies, and that just it's unprecedented. And so it used to be all car companies, and now it's pharmaceuticals. So yeah, I think the education is there. We now know that, high fructose corn syrup. I mean, does anybody think high fructose corn syrup is good? I mean, except for the corn lobby. The corn lobby says, oh, it's sugar, it's all the same. But you and I know it's not the same. Monosodium glutamate. I mean, in 1940, America consumed 1 million pounds of monosodium glutamate. Today, we're consuming 300 million pounds. That's almost a pound per person per year, monosodium glutamate. You look at these trends, and so all you have to do is get your head out of the sand, to see what's going on. And so I think, not to disagree, I'm not sure we need the education. What we need is conviction to do what we know. Mark Twain used to say it's not what I don't know that bothers me. It's what I know and don't do that bothers me, And I think that's more where we are right now. I mean, who is ready to defend, hydrogenated vegetable oil? Who's ready to defend, the seed oils? Who's ready to defend, those kinds of things? And I think we know. We just don't. We're just not willing to do. We're so keyed up on convenience and routine that it's really hard to break out of that.
Yeah, that's very true. Our whole lifestyle makes it difficult. Well, Joel, I'd like to ask you one final question. If you could give one message to everybody on the planet, what would it be?
That message would be that you matter. You matter. People feel like, well, what does it matter if I change this, change that? What does it matter if I don't go to McDonald's this week? What does it matter if I get a chicken from a GMO-free pastured poultry producer instead of the Tyson chicken? And my encouragement to everybody is every single one of your decisions matters. Wherever you are on this spectrum, your awareness level, your frustration level, whatever it is, where we are right now, is the physical manifestation, the culmination of the cumulative effect of all the decisions that have gone on before us. And if you fast forward 40 years down the road, where we as a nation, as a culture, as a people will be also the physical manifestation of the culmination of all the decisions made between now and then. And so the fact that your friend doesn't make this decision, or somebody in the family doesn't make this decision, don't let that stop you from realizing your decision matters. And one drop adds up to a teaspoon, adds up to a tablespoon, a gallon, and pretty soon, there's a whole pond full of water. And so my encouragement is that every decision you make matters. Don't join a cult. But just appreciate you have the power. We have the power to make this change, and it's going to happen one person at a time. If we're waiting around for a government agency to change, for the legislator to change it, for the law to change, you're going to be waiting a long, long time. Those things are not the catalyst for change. We're the catalyst for change, and then they follow our lead. That's the way it works.
Wonderful. Could not agree more. Joel, thank you so much for being willing to have this conversation. Would you like to share with the viewers where they can find you and anything you have going on that you'd like them to know about?
Sure. So I don't have a lot of personal, I kind of stay a little bit behind on social media, all that stuff. So you can find me at our farm website, polyfacefarms.com. That's POLYFACE. Poly, the farm of many faces, Polyface. And you'll see there where I'm traveling to speak. You can see events we're having at the farm. You can buy food. We ship nationwide. If this is, resonated with you and you say, well, man, I want to start something right now. Maybe you've never really, gotten away from Kroger's or Piggly Wiggly or, Costco. Well, I encourage you to make a try, taste it. Try and we ship nationwide. You can get there. I've written 16 books. You can, if this intrigues you, you can get a couple of my books and start. And there's a lot of information there, and we're glad to welcome you onto the website polyfacefarms.com.
Wonderful. I'll have that link in the description so people can check it out. Thank you so much for your time, Joel.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you for watching and listening. Your views, likes, comments, and shares truly make the biggest difference in supporting this channel. Don't forget to check the show notes for all the links to today's guest, as well as my links. You'll find me on social media at Love Covered Life, my website, lovecoveredlife.com, and the Be a Guest link for anybody who would like to be a guest on the channel. I have great news. Love Covered Life podcast is coming available on audio podcast. You can find it wherever you listen to your audio podcasts.